Is the S23 Ultra still worth considering now that the Samsung Galaxy S24 lineup is on the horizon? That's exactly the question I ask myself, and I think it's for a good reason. I mean, the S23 Ultra is a very solid phone that a ton of other tech reviewers ranked as the best phone of 2023. And with the S24 around the corner, its prices are already starting to dip. And you can expect it to drop even further once its successor finally comes out. So to give you the short answer, the S23 Ultra is still going to be worth it in 2024. But of course, that's for the general population. But what about you? Can the S23 Ultra fulfill your needs for 2024? Let's talk about it. First, let's kick things off with the design. There's one thing that almost everyone will notice when they hold the Galaxy S23 Ultra. It's a hefty device at 234 grams or 8.25 ounces. It takes some getting used to, but don't let it intimidate you. Its robust and heavy build screams premium quality, and I think the S24 Ultra is gonna be exactly like that. As for the looks, one might tease that this phone looks like a boring slab of aluminum and glass. Well, I beg to differ. I think it's simple and minimalistic, and I love these kinds of designs. You might call them boring, but I prefer to use the word understated instead. I do think it's a bit weird that the Galaxy S lineup is finally settling down and refining their designs instead of changing it every year. And as much as they tease Apple for being boring, ironically, I think they're doing the same thing now. And don't get me wrong, it's not bad. I think it's nice since it goes to show that they care about perfecting a product instead of throwing in crazy designs and changes every year. Moving on to the camera, the S23 Ultra is nothing short of a photographic powerhouse. Its 2000 megapixel main sensor is where the magic is at. And usually I really don't care about high megapixel numbers since it's usually just an illusion. But in this case, it does make a difference through great image processing. And as usual, this phone spits out natural looking images without looking like a washed out HDR mess. And with the S23 Ultra, they actually did something special with a 200 megapixel sensor. If you take a look at the camera app, you'll notice that it's not actually shooting 200 megapixel images all the time because of course, that'll eat your 256 gigabyte storage like there's no tomorrow. Instead, it does it through a process called binning. Every 16 pixels can function as one pixel in this camera, essentially enlarging each pixel, allowing less details and more light, which results in a very good low light performance. Another great thing that this camera has is better optical image stabilization that corrects up to 3 degrees of movement, ensuring some of the smoothest videos out of any phones in the market. And of course, the zoom capabilities are also amazing, offering a certain level of detail and clarity. From wide-angle landscapes to extreme close-ups, this camera doesn't just capture images, it captures moments with precision and vibrancy. Not to mention this already has usable 8K video. And by usable, I mean it can manage up to 8K at 30 FPS. Most phones that support 8K can only go up to 24 FPS, which I think is barely usable outside of filmmaking. Now, under the hood, the S23 Ultra is a beast. This has a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor, but it's not just any normal processor. It's a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 for Galaxy, which means it's optimized for this phone. And you know what that means? Efficiency. It does bring an extra power bump as well. The CPU is overclocked from 3.2 GHz to 3.36 GHz. And the GPU is overclocked from 680 MHz to 719 MHz. Now that might not sound like a lot, but when it comes to smartphones, that can make a ton of difference. As for storage, Samsung bumped up the base storage from 128 to 256 GB. It's UFS 4.0 now, so you can expect it to be fast. As for RAM, you can get 8 GB with 256 GB of storage, or you can also get 12 GB of RAM when you get the 512 GB of storage. Now, if you're a bit unsettled about not getting 12 gigs across the board, let me tell you, 8 GB RAM on this phone still works like a charm. Of course, you won't be able to open as many browser tabs at the same time, but honestly, who uses their phones to browse tons of tabs at once anyway? So unless you really need a ton of power, the base 8 GB RAM should be adequate for you. The screen on this device is a dream. It's a Samsung, even they make iPhone screens after all. It has a huge 6.8-inch 120Hz LTPO display, and yes, you can expect deep and true blacks and vibrant and poppy colors on this one. And combined with Android 14 and Samsung's One UI 6, the user experience is as fluid as it gets. Every tap, every swipe, and every gesture you make will be as smooth as butter. Battery life: the S23 Ultra's battery keeps the show running for days, not hours. It can usually last 1 to 2 days of normal to heavy use, and even more if you're a light user. And when you need to juice up, the 45-watt fast charging means you won't be tethered to an outlet for long. And I know 1 to 2 days of battery under normal use sounds pretty standard with flagship phones right now, but it still amazes me every time I realize it. Don't forget the little extras that make the S23 Ultra stand out. The S Pen, for instance, provides the best stylus experience on any phone right now. Granted, there aren't many phones that do this, but still it's noteworthy to have a refined feature that nobody else does it than to have a feature that feels like an afterthought. Then, of course, the S23 Ultra is also fairly durable. It has Gorilla Glass Victus 2 and an IP68 water resistance rating. This phone is not just powerful, it's also built to last, which is also a reason why it's still worth getting in 2024. So, is the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra still worth your attention in 2024? My verdict is a resounding yes. It's a device that doesn't just meet today's standards, it still sets the bar for future phones. Whether you're a photographer, a gamer, or just someone who appreciates and needs the best of the best, the S23 Ultra is still a smart choice that'll serve you well for years. And here's the best part. As of now, for some weird reason, you can get the US version of the S23 Ultra at $1,200. But if you get the global version, you can get it for only $909. So if you're up to a good deal, you can scan this QR code or check the links in the description box below. If you're concerned what's the difference between the US and global version, the US version should work optimally for US networks, and the global version obviously supports more networks, but of course it still works in the US, and to be honest, I think there's little to no performance differences when it comes to network speed. Would you daily drive an S23 Ultra in 2024? Let us know in the comments below, and if you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing as your support helps push this channel up. But until then, this is Marty and I'll see you tomorrow.